Hello there, friends. Rebecca here, the Dragon Librarian from Farmington Community Library. And Alderon is here with me today to talk to you about a couple books that we think are just absolutely fabulous. They are perfect books to read this spooky season, and really any time of the year they are perfect. But if you're looking for a really great book to pick up during this month of October, we're halfway through the month, right? We're deep in the thick of spooky season. I think that either of these books or both of these books are absolutely wonderful. So one of them is a book that is actually one of my favorite books of all time. It's one of my top 5 favorite books that I have ever read. I've read it multiple times. It's just absolutely fantastic. And the other one is a brand new book that just recently came out. And I just love them both so much that I'm really excited to talk to you about them today. And they do have a little bit of a common theme, even though they're both very different. So the first book I want to talk about is the newer one. And this one is called Lucy Undying by Kiersten White. Lucy Undying. Now, Kiersten White, I was very excited when I heard this book was coming out for a couple different reasons. The first one is that I've read a lot of Kiersten. Actually, I think I've probably read all of Kiersten White's books, and I love them. She's written really fantastic young adult literature, but she's also written a few really great adult books too. Last year's one that came out was called Mr. Magic, I talked about last year, and then she had another one called Hyde that came out the year before. And she generally writes books that deal with characters, and particularly female characters, especially in her young adult literature, that have either been overlooked in history and definitely deserve their own story. And that is what this book is about, Lucy Undying. So Lucy, if you are familiar with the book Dracula, which you should be, and if you're not, please read it because it's one of the best classics ever. If you are familiar with the book Dracula, there is a character in that book called Lucy, who is basically one of Dracula's victims when he is trying to go after Mina Harker, the protagonist's fiance at the time, or maybe wife. I don't remember when they get married in that book. He's trying to go after Mina Harker, and instead he ends up getting Lucy, who he turns into a vampire. She dies, and then she comes back from the dead and has to be killed by, Van Helsing and the other characters, Jonathan Harker and such. And, as much as I love Dracula, and I do love Dracula quite a bit, I reread it almost every year this time of year, I always kind of thought that Lucy kind of got the short end of the stick. She was a really interesting character. We don't get to spend a lot of time with her. And then before you know it, she is dead, gone, total victim of Dracula's. So when I heard that this book was basically a story that is giving Lucy back her agency, I was so excited. Because, like I said, I think she's a literary character that deserves a lot more attention and deserves basically her own fully fleshed out story. It's not just as a footnote, basically, in the classic tale of Dracula. So this is Lucy's story. And basically, there are a couple different points of view that go throughout this story. So one of the points of view is Lucy in the 1800s writing in her diary, and you're reading her diary entries leading up to her death. You have a current perspective of Lucy where she is talking to a therapist in modern day times. She's talking to a therapist about her story from death onwards, right? So that sounds confusing, but it's really not. So you have the journal Lucy that you're learning about her life and everything she went through as a human. She dies, she's killed by Dracula, rises again as a vampire, is not killed by anybody, and then continues to live through the centuries. And that's what she is telling her therapist about. Then you have the third point of view, where basically there is the other main character who she comes to befriend and actually fall in love with, who is a young woman who is escaping. She's in London and she is escaping her family, which is basically this cult. And you get to find out that they are actually a cult that focuses on vampirism, but they have twisted it and used it as a form of beauty care, which is really interesting. I don't know that I've ever read a book like that before, where vampirism is used and the blood is being used to improve looks specifically only that, right? Like you're only worrying about the looks and how you present yourself and stuff. So that's the third point of view. So it's really, really a heavily detailed, lush, descriptive book. Now, I've read some reviews that say that it's too slow paced, that it's, you know, a slow burn of a story, that there's not a lot of action. And I get it, because that's true. This book is almost 500 pages. Is it almost 500? No, it's about 430. Nah, it's not too bad. About 430-ish pages. And a lot of this, up until close to the end, there is not a lot of heavy action. It's telling the story of Lucy in the 1800s. It's telling the story of how she survives her early days of vampirism, how she gets through the centuries, the other vampires and people that she meets along the way. It's fascinating. It's meant to be a slower paced book. This is not meant to be like a sequel or a prequel of Dracula that's just like hard-hitting action. And even if you remember the actual book of Dracula, that's pretty slow-paced too, till you get further into the story. So I think that the slow pace in this book completely fits with the vibe that it's going for. I loved learning all about Lucy. I loved seeing her triumphs, her tragedies, the other vampires that she trusted, ones that betrayed her, ones that became good friends of hers, and just watching her then, you know, make it into the current time period, right? And just start to thrive and love herself was really incredible. And like I said, Kiersten White writes books with female characters that are just absolutely so fierce, and, you know, I loved this about Lucy. I thought she was such an incredible character, and I loved watching her go from this, you know, not knowing what to do with herself and feeling super lost as a newly turned vampire to, you know, being more confident and loving herself for who she is. And it was really, really incredible. So if you love the story of Dracula, even if you just have heard of it, I mean, you don't really need to know a whole lot about it. Dracula is in this book, though, I will say that. This is a great book because it takes a character from that story and just fleshes her out, gives her her own story, her own agency, which she has long, long deserved. Love this book so much. Now, I wanted to talk about the slower pace of this book particularly because the other book I'm going to talk about is an even slower paced book that also has to do with Dracula. And the reason I want to talk about them together is because this is, like I said, one of my favorite books ever. So this is called The Historian. It's by Elizabeth Kostova. And this is a book about Dracula, which is a very, very slow-paced book. And it has to do with this young woman and her scholar father and the way her father has basically found Dracula in the past, how it catches up to them both, and now the daughter has to piece together all these different histories to try to put together who Dracula actually is. It is absolutely phenomenal. So you heard me say this is one of my favorite books of all time. You know I read a lot of books, right? For this to make it to my top 5 ever, you know that it's really good. At least I think so anyway, right? Everything is subjective, of course, right? But if you're looking for another book that is perfect for this season, right? That is perfect about Dracula, about vampires in general, and just has a really slow, deep, dark gothic vibe, give this one a try too. The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Well, that's what we've got for you guys today. I'm really excited that vampire stories are gaining in popularity again. Obviously, they were out and very popular in the early 2000s because of Twilight and everything. And then there was a bit of a lull for a while. We didn't really see a lot of vampire stories coming out. They weren't popular for a little while, but they're back. There's so many great stories out there right now. And whatever you're looking for, if you're looking for more fast-paced books or if you're looking for a calm or slow-paced books like the ones I just talked about, there is something for you, absolutely. Both of these books are available at Farmington Community Library, so please feel free to check them out. And also, thank you so very much for watching, friends, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day.